What is the Ielts test? Why do students take it? How can you prepare for this test effectively? We take a deep dive into the Ielts test on this week's episode of
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with nearly 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are things, Craig?
Things are very well. I'm feeling great and ready to podcast with you this week. How are you doing?
I'm feeling fine. And as usual, I'm always game for a bit of podcasting. Let's get cracking.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the IELTS test this week. But before we do that, we have a voice message from Adriana from Colombia, but who's currently living in Chile.
Hello, Reza and Craig. It's Adriana Ruiz. This is my second message. I don't know if you remember me. I'm the Colombian girl living in Chile. And in this time, I want to share with you an experience I had around 3 weeks ago. It was at my work, and it's regarding a visit we had from some important executives from the headquarters of my company. They came from Belgium, and of course, they speak in English with us. So we had to present the master plan and the strategy of the plant. And my boss asked me to do it on his behalf because he didn't feel so confident with his English. So, of course, I said yes, and I did it. I was quite nervous, but in the moment of the presentation, I felt quite confident. And I was very fluent. I don't know how, but I did it. And everybody congratulated me, and they said that was a very clear and fluent presentation. So I think I pulled it off. I got the message across. And finally, I did it with flying colors. And thanks for your podcast. I'm feeling so confident, and I am listening to your podcast every day during my back and forth commuting. So I think it is helping me a lot with my English. And finally, I just want to ask you a question regarding to add the word out to some verbs. For example, which is the difference between help me out or just help me? And the difference between, for example, hear me out or just hear me. Is there any different adding or not the word out? That's all. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yes, of course we remember you, Adriana. Thank you so much for sending us another message. And we're not surprised that your boss was very happy because your English is excellent, isn't it, Reza?
It really is, Adriana. Thanks for getting in touch, and thanks for telling us that very positive story. I'm glad that perhaps the podcast has helped you with your professional English there. Your pronunciation is really good. And Craig, I noticed a lot of good expressions. Did you?
Yeah, we actually made a note of one or two because Adriana has a lovely way of expressing herself. For example, she said the strategy of the plant. Now, the word plant is something that grows in the garden, but it's also a synonym of factory or installation. So you can say a car factory that makes cars, or you can say the plant, the car plant. So I like that use of vocabulary there. And also, he asked me to do it on his behalf is a lovely expression. My boss asked me to do it for him or on his behalf. Did you notice any other expressions, Reza, that we should take note of?
Yeah, I noticed a couple of good expressions apart from those. You used the phrasal verb to pull off very well. You said that you were nervous at first, but you said, I pulled it off. Now, pull off can have more than one meaning, like many phrasal verbs. Here it means to be successful. So you achieved what you wanted to achieve. You pulled it off. I thought that was a very good use of that phrasal verb. In other words, you also said that you got the message across. There's another nice phrasal verb, to get something across, a message, an idea, etc. You got the message across. Very nice phrasal verbs.
Another expression I really liked, you said that you did it with flying colours. If you do something with flying colours, you do it very well. It's noticed in a positive way. So I did my presentation with flying colours. I passed my exam with flying colours. I passed it well.
Another nice thing you said was that you were traveling back and forth commuting. So you listen to the podcast and you're traveling back and forth commuting. I like that use. Well, both of the word commuting, to travel to work and back, and also the expression back and forth.
Just one small thing I noticed that you can improve. You said, thanks for your podcast. I'm feeling confident. You can say thank you for your podcast because you thank people for things. But if it's because of something, it's better to use the preposition to. So thanks to your podcast, I'm feeling confident. Or in other words, because of your podcast, I'm feeling confident. And I think, Adriana, one reason, I'm guessing here, but I think that one reason you were so successful with your presentation is that you practiced it many times. Is that true? You wrote down more or less what you were going to say, you made notes, and then you practiced and you practiced and you practiced and you practiced again until you felt very comfortable with what you were going to say. So that's a piece of advice for anybody who's in a similar situation to Adriana. Make sure you practice your presentation very well in front of your mirror, to your dog, to your grandmother, whoever wants to listen. And the more you practice, the more effective your presentation will be.
There's one little thing you said which I might change, Adriana. You said at my work. Yeah, okay, I guess you might say that. But it's more common just to say at work. You don't really need the word my because it's obvious you're talking about your own work. So we don't normally say that, just at work. Or you might prefer to say at my workplace. That's different. You know, the place where you work, then you would add the possessive my, at my workplace. But if not, it's just more typical to say at work. You don't need my in the middle there.
And I really liked your question at the end. You said, what's the difference between help me and help me out and hear me out? So I was thinking about this. Let's see if you agree with me, Reza. I think when you say help me make the bed, for example, or help me lift this box or this table, then you want help with something. But if you're saying help me out, you're kind of saying, can you find a solution to the problem? There's much more of a global, whole, entire idea behind it. I don't understand this software. Can you help me out? Means, can you solve my problem, right?
Right.
Do you agree with that?
Exactly. And I think it's something similar, not exactly the same, but similar with hear me out. To hear me, like, do you understand me? Do you hear me? Do you know what I'm saying? But to hear me out is like, hold on, listen, let's try and solve this problem again. There's some kind of problem, there's a situation. Clearly you think something, I think something different, or you don't understand me. But just hear me out. By adding the word out, it's the idea of that we're going to solve a problem here.
Or maybe wait until I've finished. Let me finish what I'm saying. If you try to interrupt someone, you might say, no, wait a second, hear me out. Let me explain everything to you before you reply. So there's that idea of completion with out at the end.
But Adriana, let me tell you that your message was really good. I'm not surprised, as Craig said, that you impressed your boss because you've impressed me. Well done.
And if anybody is in a similar situation to Adriana, if you need to do a presentation in English, I will link 2 episodes in the show notes. You can find the show notes to this episode at inglespodcast.com/407. And remember, there is a search box on the website. If you put presentations in the search box, that will take you to the episodes that will help you with your presentations in English.
Next, we got another voice message from a country not far from either Chile or Colombia. It's Maria Jose from Ecuador.
Hi Reza, hi Gray, I'm Maria Jose from Ecuador. First of all, I would like to say thank you. I discovered your podcast on Spotify and they are very, very practical, entertaining, and very helpful for all the listeners who are trying to improve their listening skill and grammar too. So thank you for that. I would like to make you a recommendation about your following podcast, if you let me, of course. It would be great if you talk about the IELTS test because I heard a lot of people asking you about that. So it could be a great idea if you give us some tips or some recommendation about the writing section, which topic we could use. Anything you could say about that will be helpful for us. And I also would like to make an invitation to our country. We have a marketing campaign, All You Need is Ecuador, and I will give you an extra motivation for you because we have the best chocolates in the world. So, see you soon. If you visit us, let me know, please. Thank you and bye.
Thank you very much, Maria Jose, for your message. And I do apologize. It's taken us a while to reply to it. I'm very sorry it's taken so long, but here we are with an episode about the IELTS exam. One small thing you said in your message, make you a recommendation. You're correct when you say make, because that is the collocation with recommendation, but without the you. So can I make a recommendation or can I make a suggestion would be better.
And I'd like to add one other little thing. You said the entertained podcasts. And I imagine you're thinking of the Spanish word entretenido. But in English, it's ing, actually. It's entertaining, ing, not ed, past participle. Entertaining podcast. Thank you for calling them entertaining.
And thank you for your invitation to visit Ecuador. I would love to visit Ecuador. I've never been. And you said the magic word.
Yes, and I already...
Chocolate.
Yep. I'm already a fan of Ecuadorian chocolate. I know it's really good. I go out of my way to buy it sometimes. I'm a big fan.
So hopefully we'll be able to come over and see you soon and eat some chocolate now that we're able to fly again. Now, we have spoken a little bit about IELTS before in 2 podcast episodes. If you go to episode 236, that's inglespodcast.com/236, you'll find an episode called Reading in the IELTS exam. And also in episode 68, a long time ago now, we spoke about the TOEFL and IELTS test, and we compared both of those tests and looked at an overview of both of them and the format of those exams. Go to inglespodcast.com/68 to listen to that one. But Reza, what is the IELTS test?
Well, we've referred to IELTS in this podcast already to both a test and an exam because people use both words. Strictly speaking, however, it isn't an exam. Really, it's a test, although you will hear people say the IELTS exam as well. So it's a test. It's the IELTS, the International I, English E, Language L, Testing T, System S, IELTS. So it's not an exam, it's a test. And it's designed to help you work, study, or migrate to a country where English is the native language. Actually, not only English. There's a few places now in the world where they offer degree courses at university in English, but they aren't technically English-speaking countries. Above all, Holland. A lot of people these days go to study a degree in Holland in English from abroad, not from Holland. And there they'll also ask you for the results of your IELTS test to know what your English is. So it could be, as well as Holland, of course, native speaking countries like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the UK, the USA, Ireland, etc. And strangely, it's owned and controlled by 3 different organizations. The British Council, they partly run it. Cambridge Assessment English, that's the same people who do things like the B2 First, the C1 Advanced, etc. Yeah, it's those guys. And also an organization called IDP IELTS Australia, which is a big organization closely linked to the Australian government, and they are one of the joint owners of the exam. That's probably why IELTS is so very big in Australia. And also in the listening, I've noticed that they nearly always have an Australian. They'll go out of their way, or you can be fairly sure there'll be something about Australia in an IELTS test.
I didn't know that. In fact, I don't know very much about the IELTS test, although I did know that it tests all 4 skills, doesn't it? The reading, the writing, the speaking, and the listening. But Reza, are they tested on the same day, or is the speaking done on a different day like the Cambridge exams?
It doesn't have to be the same day, but in my experience, it usually is the same day. So the speaking could be a different day, just like for Cambridge, but they tend to be able to organize it so it's the same day. So we can't say for sure. Yeah, may or may not be the same day, but certainly the reading, writing and listening, they're the same day.
And when you said before it's a test, not an exam, so that means you don't actually pass or fail it, correct? Like the Cambridge exams, you get a grade according to your level of English, yeah?
Yeah, isn't that a great thing about doing a test?
Oh, I love tests that you can't fail.
Can't fail.
Even if you get the number 1.
You get a grade, or you get various grades, actually. The grading system is a bit unusual. You would think that it would be 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or a percentage. No, actually, it's 1 to 9. Curious, right? So the top grade is 9. There is no 10. 9 is the top grade and 1 is the bottom grade. Well, 0, I guess, if you don't do anything.
0 is probably when you don't go, you don't turn up or arrive at the exam.
Or you arrive but just don't open your mouth, which is a bit unusual. So if you get 1, they refer to you as a non-user. You only know a few isolated words. You don't really know English. But if you get 9, you're an expert user. In other words, you have a fully operational command of the language. As regards your knowledge of English, you could say your use of English. If you're a 9, it's appropriate, it's accurate, and it's fluent, and it shows a complete understanding. In other words, your grammar and vocabulary. But note, there is no actual part which is called the use of English, unlike a Cambridge exam. So in the Cambridge exam, you have reading, writing, speaking, listening, and the use of English, right? In an IELTS exam, although they do test your use of English, in other words, your grammar and vocabulary, it will affect your results. There is no specific part of the test which is called use of English.
So how is it tested? Is it tested in your writing and your speaking? Are they listening for the grammar as you are practicing those skills?
Yes, in the assessment criteria, they refer to grammar and vocabulary accuracy and range. So that's your use of English. But I repeat, there's not a specific part of the exam called use of English, unlike in a Cambridge exam.
Reza mentioned before the Cambridge exam system with the B1, B2 first, the C1 for advanced C2, etc. That is linked strongly to the Common European Framework for English, and the grades in IELTS is also linked to that system, isn't it, Reza?
Yes, I've put in the show notes a link to a page which explains the equivalencies. So you might want to know, okay, I've got a 7.5 out of 9 in IELTS. What would that mean in the Common European Framework? Well, you can check it in the link I've put in the show notes. Everything has an equivalence which is accepted universally.
And again, you find the show notes at inglespodcast.com/407.
So you get an overall grade, not pass or fail, but you get a grade. I've already explained that 9 is the top mark and 1, or really 0, is the bottom mark. But you also get a grade for each of the 4 skills, and it's written on the certificate very clearly. For example, you could get, let's say, in the reading, 6.5. Yes, they give half marks, so between 6 and a 7, 6.5 for reading. Let's say you get a 6 for writing, and another 6.5 for listening, and a 7 for speaking. So all of those grades are clearly written in the certificate that you get. And then using those grades, they give you an overall grade. And I imagine from those marks, it would be a 6.5. So that would be your average.
Do you know why they grade the skills individually? Is it because for a particular job you might need a level of writing or reading, etc.?
It could be for a particular job, but it's even more likely that it's for a particular course of study. So universities often say, for example, overall grade minimum 6.5 with a minimum of 6.5 in writing. Because at university, writing is an important skill, obviously, academic writing. So that means you could get a 6 in speaking. You could even get a 5.5 in listening. But if you don't get 6.5 in writing, even if your overall grade is 6.5 as an average, they're not going to accept you. That's a very common requisite from universities.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've looked at a brief background of the IELTS test, but why would students take this test?
Well, if you're looking to work, live, or study in an English-speaking country, then you've got to demonstrate a high level of English language ability. Maybe because an employer or a university, if you're going to study, ask you for that. But it's more than that. Some governments may require legally, by law, specific proof of your level of English before they'll give you a visa to enter. For example, the British government, very often for students, they require them to have a minimum level of English to be allowed to even get the visa to come into the country. Regardless of what the university says, the British government's not going to give you a visa, perhaps, to get into the country unless you've already got a certain minimum grade at IELTS.
They also test if you know how to buy alcohol and you can organise a good party.
Is that true?
So IELTS is the most popular test for those students or people looking to migrate or enter to Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Ireland and the UK, and it's globally recognised by more than 11,000 employers, universities, schools and immigration organisations, including some 3,400 institutions in the USA. So it's widely accepted in many countries and by many organisations.
Yes, in fact, it's the test that most universities in those countries prefer foreign language students to take. Yes, they do often accept Cambridge exams, but their preferred exam for universities is IELTS. That's the one they like you to have because of what I explained earlier about the grading system. That way they know exactly what your reading, writing, speaking and listening is. It's very clear. That's why they like it.
So let's have a little look at the format of the IELTS test. Now, the listening and speaking parts are the same for all candidates. There's no difference. However, the reading and the writing parts they are slightly different depending on whether you do the general training or the academic version. Can you explain a bit more about that, Reza?
Yes, it's slightly misleading. You might think that, oh, well, I definitely have to do the academic if I'm going to do something academic. It's a little bit more complicated than that. The general version is intended for people wanting to emigrate, to work in a country, but it can also be for people who are going to study below university level. In other words, going to school. Imagine a child, a pupil at a school, wants to go to a foreign country. They're 15 years old, let's say, or 12 years old, or perhaps younger. Then probably the general exam will be enough for them. They don't need the academic. They could do the academic if they want, but the general will probably be accepted because at 15 years old, you're not studying at a university level. However, if you're going to study at university level or above, then you definitely need the academic version. But it's not only for people going to university, also for certain professionals. When I say professional, I mean those professions which require a lot of academic training. For example, doctors, nurses, teachers. So if you're going to emigrate to an English-speaking country to work as a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, for example, you'll need to do the academic version, not the general one, even though you're not going to study.
Now, like the Cambridge exams, students who have taken Cambridge exams, the C1, the B2, etc., there is a paper-based and a computer-based version of the Ielts test. So you can choose to do it with a pen and paper or based on the computer. However, the computer-based test is not online yet, although it will be soon. Ielts have announced that they intend to introduce an online test version very soon, but at the recording time of this podcast, that's February 2022, it hasn't yet been released, but they're saying they will introduce it soon on the computer.
I'm curious to know how that will be received because, Craig, as far as I know, Cambridge in their exams, B2 first, C1, advanced, proficiency C2, etc., they haven't announced any plans to go online, have they, that I'm aware of?
I did speak to someone from Cambridge at a conference before the pandemic, and they were looking at ways of doing the listening test and the speaking test online, but they haven't released any news. Obviously, since the pandemic, I suppose they've changed the way they're working. But I think they are planning and thinking of moving online, although there's no definite date yet.
Yeah, so the same as Ielts, though. But Ielts have announced theirs. They've publicly announced that they plan to do it. I don't think Cambridge have said anything publicly.
Not officially.
You may have spoken to somebody at a conference, but there's no
actually, it was in the bar at a conference.
Okay, right.
But it was, but it was definitely a representative of Cambridge. So nothing yet for sure.
So Ielts have officially announced they are going to do it this year. We're recording this in 2022, but it hasn't happened yet. Let's wait and see what happens. If they do it first before Cambridge or before the Cambridge exams, I'm curious to know how it will be received. If it's really, really popular, I imagine Cambridge will be very keen to copy them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, they're definitely in competition, aren't they? But there is a big difference. Unlike Cambridge exams, the candidates only hear each audio once in the listening test. And also, there's only one examiner and one candidate for the speaking part. Of course, when you do the Cambridge speaking tests, there are two candidates and two examiners in the room with you.
Yes, and another thing you need to bear in mind about the speaking is that it will be recorded, whether you like it or not. That doesn't happen in a Cambridge exam. Occasionally they ask Cambridge candidates if they wouldn't mind being recorded for training purposes, so they can train examiners, and you can say no. But in an IELTS exam, you have no choice. Your voice will be recorded. All speaking exams are recorded.
There's no use of English section in the IELTS exam, and another difference is the results are given within 13 days after the paper-based exam and 5 days after the computer-based version. So the results come to you much quicker than with Cambridge. And although no expiry date is given, most institutions won't accept IELTS results more than 2 years old. So the exam does have an unofficial expiry date. You should present the test results within 2 years to an official institution. Reza, do we have any IELTS links that can help people who want to prepare for the exam?
Yes, in the show notes, we've put some links to various places. We've got, strangely you might think, a Cambridge link, but let me remind you why. Because Cambridge, as I explained earlier, are one of the joint owners of IELTS. So they're kind of in competition with themselves, curiously, because you've got the Cambridge exams and then you've got the IELTS test, but Cambridge partly own IELTS. So very smart on the part of Cambridge. They can't lose. Whether you do a Cambridge exam or you do an IELTS exam, they'll be getting some of the money and the credit, I guess. So I've got a link to a Cambridge website about IELTS. Then I've got a link to IELTS.org, which is a page which represents all of the owners. And also a thing called Road to IELTS, written all together. So that's ROADTOIELTS. When you first read it, you might think it's road toilets. It's not road toilets. It's road to IELTS.com. And there's a test drive version. In other words, there's a free version. That's the British Council's online preparation for the IELTS, but they've got the permission of Cambridge and IDP Australia to use it as well. And there is a premium version. You can pay and get lots and lots of tests, but why not try the test drive free version? You don't get as much material, but you get a little bit of everything to give you an idea about what to expect in the test.
And you can find those links as usual on the webpage. Go to the show notes at inglespodcast.com/407. Maria Jose, we hope you found this episode useful, and for anyone who's interested in taking the IELTS test. But now it's your turn to practice your English. We would love to get a message from you. Why don't you send us a voice message and tell us where you're from, what your name is, and any ideas you might have for future episodes. You can contact us by voice on SpeakPipe, that's speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast.
You could write, if you prefer, send us an email. You could get Craig. He's at craig@inglespodcast.com, or me, Reza, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And if you would like to practice your English with a paid course, visit the Mansion Ingles online store. That's at store.mansioningles.net. And before we go, we'd like to thank all of you who are helping us by supporting this podcast on Patreon. You can join our Patreon program for as little as $1.20 per month. That's including the VAT, the value-added tax, and you get instant access to recent transcriptions of this podcast to understand every word that Reza and I say. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/Ingles podcast for more information.
We'd love to be able to mention all our Patreon sponsors, but we don't have time. So as usual, we're just going to give a big thank you to our most recent sponsors who've recently started to support us in the last month. And they are Carles Casasola and Sergio Munoz. A big thank you to you and indeed all of our sponsors.
Yes, thank you very, very much. We hope you've found this episode useful. We have no idea what we're going to be speaking about on next week's podcast, and that's why we'd love you to get in touch and give us some episode ideas. Until next time, have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.